Hey everybody, this is Jason. Thanks for joining us on the subject matter today, this morning here, 3 days from the summer solstice, 400 meters elevation in the land of Queens, Australia. I'm hearing subject matter as I sip some Java from some economists that I do respect to speak the forbidden facts that have been in the past on how Reaganomics was going to look over recent years. There's only 2 or 3 economists on a global scale that have shared my opinion in relation to asset markets having to go south over the last couple of years from the ballooning that they've experienced from the quantitative easing that has occurred across Western markets. It's not something that people have wanted to hear, but it is a fact that ultimately is what goes up must come down. And let's take a look. If you've got a balloon full of helium, it's going to get to a point where the air pressure above is too high and it has to pop. Now, I don't make the rules, but I have played the game for long enough to have chosen a life that, makes me look like I probably shouldn't be taking advice for financial or maybe any matter other than how to grow a beard. We're not going to go too deep into the fact that I was a commodities trader in the 90s, or I've been raised around CEOs across this nation for years as a child, or that my philosophies of playing the markets, whether they be commodities, shares, precious metals, has always been profitable, or that running a radio show, the Emerge and See podcast, for a dozen years here in Australia, was forecasting pretty much everything before the forecasts were broadcast. And seeing the GFC, which apparently started off in the United States, but no, it didn't. It started off in Europe as the banks were broke, as all the banks were broke. And that just transpired to, obviously, them having to lend out more loans to try and get more interest to not be so broke. Which obviously those loans were given to people and to businesses that were never going to be able to afford it. And that was the final crunch. So there's a backstory, and the backstory that got me into the out of property was the GFC about 18 months prior to it, and it was a full investment into the precious metals market at that time. Sold all shares, sold property, got out of debt, and invested where I chose, and then lived off that and continued to invest for a period of time while witnessing that once again loans had to be given because interest rates were so low that they had to give more and more loans because the interest rates were so low. And they would give you a loan over the phone, unseen. And that is dangerous territory. And that is predominantly how the S&P, the share markets, and crypto managed to navigate financial boosting, you might say, to the moon from the period of 2010, 2011, all the way through to 2019. Before the prediction of the imprisonment, which was brought to you by Saturn and Pluto's conjunction in Capricorn. And there's a history in Saturn and Pluto, so go and do some research on that if you like astrology, and if you don't, start to like astrology. But the opportunity to look at where the zombie corporations were occurring in relation to cheap money, where banks had gone bust, so we went close to 0% interest rates, which allowed corporations to borrow to pay shareholders dividends to make them look like they were making money as profits, but wasn't making money. And if we take a look at the backbones of it, there's a lot still to crumble. And it's going to go further and further south because obviously the quantitative easing of stimulus that prevented societies of a Western and Eastern nature from rebelling across the planet since March 2020. For those that like a cerveza sickness as an opportunity to engage in, the penny hasn't completely fallen. And it is an opportunity for us to make ourselves quite a bit of money. But only for those that don't have debt, and only for those that have the cash or the assets right now that will have value in the future. So we have inflation of a scale that has yet to be seen, and therefore has been lied about. The notion of what gets added to the pile and the bundle that inflation is calculated from. And then we'll take a look at those circumstances and see that it doesn't include the necessities like food and energy, but that the necessities are always going to remain inflated and continue to inflate, predominantly due to supply and demand, which has been limited and restricted by varying other facets of production, like fertilizers. Because food, you didn't know, been growing food for 35 years, organically, biodynamically, permaculturally, syntropically, globally. And food coming off land, it has and will always be the way to print money and the way to lose it, depending on what side of the fence you're on. And if your fences are too close to your neighbours, then you better electrify them, because there's a good chance that your food will just get stolen, as has occurred throughout time. So, get yourself a machete. Learn to protect it, not just harvest it. So, a bit off topic, but those that have the cash in the future are going to have the capacity to invest in things that they might choose to have out of choice, because the rest of things that aren't essentials will become deflationary, and deflation will become a thing for all of those things that, after all, very few will have the capital to be able to invest in, and therefore the price is going to drop just so that things can even sell. And those shops can have clearance before they close down for good. And the jobs that were being created for the opportunity for those products to even be sold, let alone manufactured or delivered, won't be necessary anymore. And that will create more of an economic concern for the people that had those jobs. And then everything that is debted and indebted to them will become less viable and affordable, in which case they'll be trying to sell it all. So there'll be some deals and bargains for all of those that are interested. However, we are in a circumstance where our economies globally are going to be very different from years gone by. The entitlement that we've come to live according to and possibly even demand as our opportunities for maintaining the lifestyles that we've been sold become less and less. And our asset markets have obviously been crumbling since November 2021, again predicted and forethought based on a number of factors that we can discuss with you in other videos. But what is the biggest problem for us is how far it's going to go from here, and how much people have to hang on to those assets that are debts. They are liabilities. They are not actually assets. Assets make us money. Liabilities lose us money. Cars in driveways are liabilities. Unless they make you money in an economy based on necessities, then they are assets. So the notion of our creation of our circumstances needs to be looked at from a perspective that is valuable to our future as opposed to liable to our future. And that's something that is a concern for me, for all of humanity. Because ultimately, the more stressed and indebted humanity is, the more unpredictable and volatile humanity is. And the more people will wish that they chose bus life for mobility, to exit the system, more than just in a ethereal or structural way, but geographically pronounced. Now, I'm not sure if you can tell, but as you can probably hear, there's nothing that is scripted in this, because it is just the existence. There doesn't need to be notes, because it is just facts. Difficult to swallow and impossible to digest once, if it even can get down the esophagus, poetically, as we understand it's being delivered. But as difficult as it is to recognise that someone living a life barefoot, bare-chested and bearded in a bus for all the reasons that one might cross the street as I approach may very well be the reasons that we pay attention to the aspects that are spoken, because forward planning is forewarned, and forewarned is for a future, and a future is what everybody has based their lives on living, while not really paying attention to the equations that allow it to occur. And this is a problem when we deal with our lives. The amount of people that I've recognised have chosen not to listen to my caring advice over the last number of decades, let alone the last 24 to 36 months, telling and predicting the cycles that were to come to the date of the 12th of January 2020 have become negligent to the truths that they have been shared, and now the fears and worries that occur in their existence is beyond ways of helping them. However, my interests are to explore the future in relation to making now the present moment. I know you didn't go and short your shares and your crypto back in 2021 as I was speaking into the reality that was going to occur. And as it did occur, I know that you kept thinking that it's only going to get as far low as it did at the moment that you thought, and then it got lower and lower and lower. And I know that you think that now it has gone as low again. And with FTX and with Binance and with all the crypto exchanges, and while you might be able to pull it off and hold it in a key, it's still going to have its value. Zero. It's all going back to zero. And it's going back to zero because the elite don't want too many elite lying around the place, just so we know. And I'm not going to say that I know because I come from that strain, bloodline even, because I do. and that's even crazier for you to hear. And I'm not even going to go down that path. I just choose to have gone down that path and have more value in this bus than than people have in their lives. Because as I said, debt is liability. And it's the greatest liability when we can't afford to pay the debts themselves. So we need to express this fact deep inside our hearts to understand the outcomes that are going to be circumstantial to the choices we make in the here and now. So I take my cup of joe and I'm going to go inside and I'm going to put on some Tom Waits, and I'm going to go out to the garden and I'm going to keep planting seeds as I express my experience to you all here. To be wary of the coming months, to be wary of 2023, to be wary of the world in the way that biblical texts have forecast, that convergences of markets, convergences of weather patterns, convergences of food crop failures, convergences of everything capable of crashing all at once. And what would it mean if everything crashed all at once? Where would everyone get their food from? What happens if the food supply stops? Because we know that the stupid markets have a 3-day supply. What happens if weather patterns cut off the roads again? What happens when the cost of fuel is too expensive to use the cars or vehicles that we haven't paid for, that perhaps we've only just bought? What happens if the price of power is too much to spend on our homes? What happens if the power grids go down? What happens if the world that we've become so reliant on isn't as reliable as we thought? a fear comes over us. But that's why I've been here, to share that there needs to be no fear. Just needs to be an awareness, an opportunity to cut and run. And if you don't think anything I've spoken in this situation, this video, my videos, my life has occurred or will occur, then it's time to pay attention to history so that we can recognize the future. I could talk about my astrology and why my voice has been for humanity, for awareness, for the kindness that is delivering the kind of information that might seem insane until it's the only way to move forward. But that's probably just because we've chosen to live a lie rather than to live the experiences ourselves. So when you take a look at influences, question everything. For the information that they're selling you is only information they've heard, nothing they've told, lived, or learnt from experience. Unfortunately, if you want to be influenced, it's about the future being different, and that's where we come from. Bless up, everybody. The future is a challenge. If you have questions, raise them in the comments. I'll see you there.